to get rid of stuff, I'm always going to do 40% off from this point forward. Like if I want it gone, I'm going to do 40% off, and it moves so much faster. Like I didn't have to edit the listing or anything, just huge markdown.
Yeah, that's exciting. All right, guys, just to echo what Tech put in the chat, this video will be on my YouTube channel later in the week. So if you don't want to be seen, just make sure you turn off your video. And that's exciting, Isaiah. And you're still sticking with the same number of listings for right now, correct?
No, not really. I've been doing 27 a day recently, and those are my regular days. But on the weekends, like I've massively shot up my listings because I was doing 20 and then 5. So like 25 for 6 days a week, basically. But now on the weekends, I'm doing, if I go to the flea market and I find 40 items, I'm gonna list 40 items. If I go to the flea market and I find 70 items, like when I went to that church and got those 70 new pairs, like I'll list all of them. So whatever I find on the weekend, I do the tech philosophy or whatever from the day and list all of them that weekend, just to boost sales up a little bit, because we're getting into Q4 on my store a little bit bigger. And due to this 40% off sale, like my store value shot down a little bit, and my number of listings is constantly decreasing too, because like things are selling much faster. So I'm listing like crazy. As many listings as I can get up, I'm trying to get them up.
Yeah, I was looking yesterday. I created a little kind of like a what sold video, and I was looking at my 10 best sells of the week. And even though shoes is a small percentage of what I list, like today, I think I listed 3 pairs of shoes. But when it comes to the highest sellers, the majority of my high sellers were either jackets or shoes. So yeah, you could definitely make a good living just selling shoes. Or if you're a clothing seller and you don't mind switching and you have the setup, it's a nice way to inject a little higher ROI. And I don't go out explicitly looking for it, but that you'll find shoes along with the clothing, and when I find it, I'll pick it up. Justin had a question for you, Isaiah. He said, do you plan to always mark down items after 60 or 90 days?
No, the only reason why I'm marking down so aggressively right now is because I'm trying to get rid of the stuff in that older inventory system. Like, because you remember when all my shelves fell, when all that stuff fell down, those shoes, basically, I just like let them sit there. I didn't move them. They were just there for an extended period of time. So like all of that inventory that was there, and I knew where it was when it was on the floor. But now that it's no longer on the floor and it's in those bins, it's much harder to find it. So it like to pick a shoe that was in that section now might take 2 or 3 times as long as the other shoes. So I'm trying to get rid of all of them so that I can just focus on, the things that are in my day system, which takes like 30 seconds to pick. So I'm only doing those super aggressive sales right now just to get rid of that inventory. But if I ever find where like I have a bunch of inventory from like 6-7 months ago, then I'll do the same kind of philosophy and wipe out all of that using that 40% off sale. But that is what I'm gonna do going forward, but not on a 90-day spree, most likely, unless I start running out of space again.
Are you switching your inventory system over to Chris's setup?
No, today testing out my system, like on the side in which I have all my, because like on the left side of my storage room is all the ones by date, and on the right side is the other systems. And the left side, it like picking everything was easy. Like it was very, very easy. So I really, really enjoy it. And since it's in those durable, heavy bins, like I don't have to worry about anything getting inside of them, because Chris' system is an open system. So you'd have to have an open system in order to pull it off successfully. And having an open system inside of a dusty storage unit isn't ideal, unless you bag all the shoes, which I don't do that. So.
Okay. Good deal. All right. Well, I guess we can get to the book. Tonight we're going over 4, 5, and 6. And then next week we'll do 7, 8, and 9. I just basically broke it up into 3 chapters a week so we could finish it in like a month. I'm kind of curious what other people think about the reading. Anybody has any comments or impressions. Because for me, to be honest, I mean, there's value here for me for sure, but like this book has the least punch from this is just my opinion, right? This book has the least amount of punch out of any of them that we've read. And I'm not saying it's bad, and I definitely think the ideas here are good. And it may just depend on, how your business is doing, how you're handling your accounting, but it just seems like a little bit more of a tedious read for me. Like chapter 4, he titles it Choose Your Own Adventure, which I remember when I was a kid, I used to read those Choose Your Own Adventure books where, you were in an adventure and you would, make a choice in the book, and it would give you 2 different pages to go to. And based on your decisions, the outcome would be different. And I guess the idea was that you were kind of controlling your own destiny. And with chapter 4, he prefaces it with that, basically saying, hey, if you're a very detailed, you want the nitty gritty, read through this whole chapter. He kind of gives a warning that's going to be really detailed. But if you don't want that, if you just want to go with the estimates from earlier in the book, then go ahead and go into chapter 5. For me, I did kind of read and skim through chapter 4, but I don't know. I just felt like I was kind of in the weeds with some of this information. And I guess keeping in mind the premise of the book, right? Like, and I guess a question could be like, as resellers, how do our businesses, maybe relate to other businesses, and is there a difference? I definitely think there are some principles here, but like just from my own situation, like this is my full-time job now, so I'm already paying myself first. So that, because I on the first of the month, I go ahead and pull the money from the profit into my account. So in a way, it's like I'm already being forced to do what he's preaching, and maybe that's why it's not as strong of an impact to me as maybe some of the other books. I don't know. What did anybody have any thoughts on chapter 4? Like, did anybody read through it all, or?
I'm just kind of going by the last couple times I read it, but I had read Profit First for e-commerce sellers this week, which has pretty much just adds on to Profit First itself. But so the light bulb that kind of went off in my head was that it's a cash management system. So if, like you said, if you're already good at managing your money, then it's probably not going to be that helpful. But if you're stuck in that cycle of overspending, not having enough for your bills, and then or your inventory, or you're just scrambling, you're putting things on sale, and the money's not going where it should be going, like he says, to steal from yourself. Like if you're pulling from your profit, you're basically your emergency fund. If you're pulling from your tax account, then it just gets to a point where I think his whole point of the percentages is that if you don't allocate it from the beginning, it's really hard to play catch up, and you shouldn't be just leaving it all in one big pot, because you're going to look at your bank account and you're going to say, oh, I have $5,000 in my bank account, I'm going to go spend it. And you can't do that, because a certain amount has to go for taxes, a certain amount should be put away for an emergency fund, and a certain amount should be put away for your inventory. And in Profit First for e-commerce sellers, she says, she mostly talks about Amazon sellers, but she said your ROI on your inventory should be at least 30%, otherwise it does not work. And I just thought that was interesting.
So that's what a Facebook group, what you mentioned, is that
no,
resource?
It's Cindy Thomason's ebook. She wrote Profit First for e-commerce sellers with
Okay.
Mike, who wrote Profit First. So she just kind of expands on some of the concepts that he wrote in Profit First. But like I said, it's a cash management system. So if you want to delegate your cash to where it needs to go, so that later on you're not scrambling, to pay your tax bill, it's just easier to get in the habit of doing that first. But I was reading up on some articles about how Profit First doesn't work as well if you're trying to grow. And maybe Tech can answer or can speak to this, but like with reselling, you have to put more money into inventory. So if you're in the position where you want to build a full-time income and you don't have to reinvest, you don't have to pay yourself at the beginning, if you just put that money into more inventory, like, does it eventually catch up? Or is it just going to be that, because it's really hard to like spend, if you're spending like 80% of your income, of your sales cash on reinvesting, and then to suddenly drop that down to 30% to pay yourself the other 50%, like that seems like it would be difficult if you were already in the habit of doing it. But I feel like if you limit yourself to 30% of your expenses, like 30%, like, we have lots of expenses other than just inventory. So inventory has to come out of, like, maybe it's 10% or whatever. You're limiting yourself to whatever that 30% is. And so it's really hard to grow because you're not, I don't know. Yeah.
Could you expand upon that a little bit more for me? I'm trying to understand that concept a little bit better. So
okay, so say if you made $1,000 in sales,
yeah,
according to Profit First, you would be putting 5% into a profit account. You would be putting 15% into a tax account. You would be paying yourself half of that, so 500, and then 30% of that would go to your expenses. So of that 30%, you have to buy your inventory. And so Sydney Thomason says, when you sell, like say you sell a pair of shoes that cost you $5, when you sell it, you move that $5 back to your inventory account. So that you never, like, you always have cash. But I'm just trying to read Tech's comment. Yeah, he said eventually you can't spend all the money that is coming in. The money you can't spend becomes the profit. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you had a day job where you didn't have to pay yourself, then you could just take that money that you'd be paying yourself and just buy more inventory. But like, you can build the business that way. But what happened with me specifically was that I didn't know what I was doing for the first I didn't know about my sell-through rates. I didn't know about brands. I didn't know about styles. And so I feel like just now, like 3 years in, I can go to the thrift store and I can say, okay, like I know what to pick up. I know how to check comps. I know how to check sell-through rate. So I think if you're not buying the right inventory, then that money is a waste, right? But I don't know. For me, I decided that it's probably better for me to have that habit of paying myself and then setting aside that 30% and working out of that 30% instead of, because down the road, like, I want to pay myself a full salary when I've grown enough to do that. But I just feel like if I'm used to spending all of that money on more inventory and like storage unit and all the expenses, it's going to be hard for me to kind of backtrack and say, like, I mean, I guess if at that point you're bringing in like $10,000 or $20,000 a month, like it.
I feel you on that. That's kind of why I asked the question, because I remember maybe I don't have my calendars in front of me, like the earlier ones, but like maybe in like March, April-ish or somewhere around there, around the time where I was doing a lot of investing, like I was probably saving like 15-20% of the money that I was making, at least somewhere around there. And then like at some point of time, I started like reinvesting everything. And like at this point, that's pretty much all that I do. Like I reinvest maybe like 90% of everything that I make, if not more than that. And like the only time where I'm spending money not on inventory is when like a bill, like I need to pay rent or something like that, right? So that week I will take the income, the cash flow, dedicate that towards rent. And then after that, go back to buying inventory. So that's really interesting that there could be some dangers there from like super reinvesting like that. Because if something comes up, you might not be able to pay for it. And that's always something that I'm a little bit worried about, that because I reinvest so much money that I'm not like, I might bring in 10,000 a month in sales, but like technically I'm broke because I'm reinvesting almost 100% of that. So it doesn't
I
actually.
do think that is the right way to go. Like I said, if you know what you're buying is going to flip for a good profit. But for me, like, I just have a tendency, I just know myself, I have a tendency to overspend, and profit first like reels me back in and it's like, okay, you only have this much to spend, and that just makes it easier for me to actually pay myself. But I was the same way. Like, I was only paying myself $200 a month, and then just like reinvesting. I bought, I bought a photography tent. I bought my thermal printer. I upgraded that kind of stuff. And then I also just more inventory, better inventory, storage unit, just bins, shelves, all the things. And yeah, it's true. Not many businesses have the margins we have, though. Yeah.
I think Walmart said like 12%, or on some of their items they're like 1% or something like that. Like, it's super crazy what kind of margins that they have.
Yeah, I mean, it's just up to you. Like, he also talks, he just really wants people to pay themselves what they're worth, because I feel like, at least for me, like, I kind of got to a point where I'm like, okay, I need to pay myself more, because it's kind of tricky with me because disability has their own separate rules. So that's a whole other can of worms, like with how much I'm allowed to make. And then, that's a whole other thing, which I won't get into. So it's kind of like just kind of trying to deal with that budget, and then trying to deal with like my business. But yeah, like, just I felt like, okay, I'm working really, really hard all the time to grow this, but like, I didn't feel like I was seeing the money in my account. And so when I started doing profit first, and I started having my expenses be in line where they should be, then it was so easy to pay myself, and it just made me have such a sense of pride of like, wow, like I'm paying myself what I'm actually worth. And I feel like there's just something symbolic about doing that, whether it's 500 a month or 50,000 a month. Like, just to, he says, like, you're your most important employee, so treat yourself that way. But he also talks about not having, like, lifestyle creep, where once you start making some money, that you go out and buy a house, you buy a car, and you buy whatever. So talks a lot about burnout, and it's disheartening to constantly be paying into the business and not paying yourself for your effort. Yeah, exactly. But if you're in really like crazy grow mode, then and you already have like other income, and you're not, I think it's different if you're trying to survive off of that income, then yeah, you need to pay yourself. But if you're just wanting to grow and you have other income, then I think it is smart to put it all back into the business.
I think for me, like when I was reading even before, but chapter 5, like, I think maybe in e-commerce, the danger, at least for me, is trying to scale too quickly. It's like you see it's working, and at least my mindset was, okay, this was before I didn't understand about you have to master it and become an expert. And so I'm like, well, let's just hire some VAs. Let's get more listings up. Let's expand the storage. Get all, like what you were saying, Carlin, get all the best equipment, because at least in my mind, I also know that those are expenses that you can write off. But I think that can be dangerous. And as I've been reading through this, and it also reminds me of Dave Ramsey, if he does the money makeover in Financial Peace University. Like when they're talking about percentages, that's what Dave Ramsey does in your personal income, where he has the envelope system where it's all based on percentage. Like you get a percentage for grocery money and you determine a percentage for entertainment and slashing expenses, and you're living within those envelopes, which is very similar to what he's talking about, setting up these accounts. And I do think it is kind of difficult to scale and stay within those parameters at the same time. But I do like the general idea of a lean model, and he gets a lot of, once we get to chapter 6, he kind of digs into the debt. But chapter 5, some of the key points, he starts off talking about like a mindset, like you have to have the right mindset. You have to believe, which I'm always connecting like what I've read to other things I've read or talked about, and it makes me think of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which is like kind of like the original entrepreneur book. It was written in the early 1900s, and his whole thing was you create this vision and you repeat it to yourself like at least twice a day with emotion, and because the power of subconscious, because what you believe, if you believe in something, you can achieve it. But if you don't have the belief, then you have no chance. Then he talks about setting up the different accounts, which are your operating expenses, the owner's pay, like Carlin was talking about, profit, and then taxes. So I get that, how you would, make sure you have money for each of those. Then in chapter 5, he starts talking about cutting expenses. And he also talks about the system of creating a rhythm. And he recommends the 10th and the 25th. So like you would evaluate, I guess that's when you'd pull open your bank statements, your 4 different accounts that you have, and you would allocate that money accordingly. And like for me, I use GoDaddy bookkeeping, which is real easy, and it kind of does a lot of this for me. And I've been doing it weekly, so I do think I'm going to switch. Maybe that's a little too often. Maybe I'll switch to the 10th and the 25th. And then the last major point he talks about, chapter 5, is quarterly distribution. So like every quarter, every 3 months, I guess that's when you would do the withdrawal. And these are gives like, I'll just salt notice here. He gives those estimates in the first few chapters, but if you read chapter 4, I guess you could figure out your exact percentages, and then you would use that for your distribution. Let's see, there's a lot going on in the chat. Let's kind of see what we have here.
The whole point is that sales don't always catch up to your expenses. So if you're I don't know, I'm just going to speak from my own experience, because maybe that's a little bit more tangible to understand. But like, basically I was getting good inventory, I was listing it, I was selling it, but then because I was upgrading, like I would buy more inventory, and then I was, like I said, I was buying a lot of stuff that wasn't gonna make me money. Like I bought my printer, I bought my lights, I bought, a ring light, I bought a mannequin, blah blah blah, all this stuff. Then I realized, like, well, I can't sell enough stuff to like get to make all of these expenses like balance. And I mean, I still paid everything off, obviously, but like it was just, I just ended up in a cycle of like sale to sale to sale to sale to sale. And I was just constantly feeling like I need to catch up, because I was putting stuff on a credit card, and then, I was paying it off, but I was feeling like, okay, now I have to pay it off by X date. And like I was selling stuff for, too cheap to just, so he just wants you to have the cash to run your business and then have the other stuff set aside. And if you don't have enough cash to run your business, then you have to cut those expenses. And it's kind of a harsh reality, but like if you don't have your expenses in line with your sales, you're just going to constantly be spinning your wheels. And unless you're investing in more inventory, I think that's the exception. But you just want to get out of that cycle of like playing catch up. You just want to feel in control and like ahead, so that when those sales come in, then you already know where the money's going, and then you know how much you have to spend. And that's why, like, it's good to have a separate inventory account, so that if you are going thrifting, you just know that whatever money is in there, that's what you have to spend, and that's it. And like I said, there's lots of people who are way more disciplined and, I'm sure don't need this, but for me, like, it just really put me in line, and it was a game changer for me, because I started getting ahead, and then I stopped struggling so much of just always feeling like I was behind.
So, Brian, could we talk about that a little bit more? So it sounds like Carlin, did I pronounce your name correctly, by the way? Is it Carlin? Okay, so it sounds like once you kind of made a plan for like the income that was coming in, it became much, much easier to manage it, and you started getting ahead, and I think that, like, the reason why, like you're saying, like, it might not occur that way with some people. So there's some people where it's like, I don't spend money on anything except for inventory and bills, right? But if you start spending money on other things, then you can run into this situation where you kind of run out of money because you don't have enough money in your business that it can turn over the money quickly enough to pay back all of the expenses you just accrued. So it becomes a lot more difficult for you to, pay off your rent. It becomes more difficult for you to do X, Y, or Z. So, but when you have, okay, I have $100, I can only spend $100 on my expenses. And that includes lights, that includes mannequins, that includes inventory. I have to figure out where I'm going to allocate this $100. And when you play it that way, you're way more specific about what you're buying. And it allows you to not get caught up in that I don't have enough money to pay for inventory and pay for my bills and things like that if you're trying to live off the income. It makes a lot of sense. Brian, did you want to say something about that too?
Well, Vanessa has her hand raised. Vanessa?
Yeah, I was just thinking this kind of like goes back to Chris's experiment with that store that he did, where, if you guys remember, like early on, he was very, very picky about like the items that he picked up, where he was going to have huge margin and really fast sell through. I don't know, this just kind of brings me back to that, because I think that once you start scaling, sometimes those margins can kind of creep back. And if you're not budgeting for those inventory expenses, which I don't think we talk a lot about in the group, like everybody wants to raise their listing number, but no one ever talks about like the costs that their increased expenses that are going to come with that. So I don't know. I don't really have a conclusion there. Just like some things I'm picking up on.
Yeah,
Whenever I've gone like over my budget, which is a very kind of loose budget, but I kind of reverse engineer it. So I look at what I would want to pay myself, and then taxes, profit, and then my expenses. And then I see what I would like, what net profit per item I would need. And it's usually at least 30 or 35. So it wasn't until I started getting better inventory that was flipping faster and flipping for more money that I actually made progress. Because if you're just kind of flipping the same $20 over and over again, it's hard to kind of get ahead. And if you're just going back and spending it, but yeah, I mean, I started getting like $50 items, $60 items, $70 items. I had $100 sale the other day. Like that was what actually gave me the margin to be able to pay for everything else.
What Vanessa said, and if you think about it, like if you limit the amount of capital that you're going to spend on inventory, you're going to be much more selective. And that makes me think of Thrift a Life on YouTube. And on one of the morning calls, he's the guy that has the men's clothing guide, Buy Me a Coffee, where he rates like all the men's brands by different tiers and sell-through rate. And his model is, because he has limited space, and I don't know about capital, maybe it's capital as well, he is only looking for items with very high sell-through rates, and that sell for good money. So he's been very selective with the inventory he's buying. Now he's obviously not doing the scale as a lot of people in the group, but that seed money is turning over very quickly and for a high profit. And so when I think about being selective, that's probably the type of model when you're running a real lean operation. And then naturally, probably as you begin to scale, like there's a limited amount of those, $50, $100 items that you're going to find, and you're going to have to start, widening your net of things you're going to look for. But I do like that mindset of, of being selective. And I think that's kind of like the big takeaway from me so far after the first 6 chapters is like this lean, like the lean approach. And I think about Tech, and of course, Tech, you could talk about this. I know you spoke about it a lot, like his 2 bins, the carpet, everything was really lean for a long time with him, and it's still a pretty lean operation. And he did not scale for a long time, so he kept reinvesting. And I think that mindset is what like chapter 6 is about, like destroying debt, keeping your costs down so that your business can grow. And Tech says lean and small is very difficult to grow and scale. Scale has way more cost, and that's what brings margins down. If you start with slim margins, it's difficult to scale. Have to have huge margins in the beginning because of no overhead. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I think too, if you can, I'm just saying for thrifting, but if you can have 1 or 2 items that pays for the lot quickly, like if you go to the bins and you find, a coat or something that you can sell and it sells in like a week for $50 or something, and that pays for the lot, I think that is something that you can, that's sort of fairly easy to do. And then that money is not tied up, because that's where I had a lot of issues, where I had so much inventory that I'd paid $7, $8, $9 for a piece. Like here jeans and dresses are $9 and most of the shirts are like $8. This is not the bins obviously, but so I had all this inventory that nobody wanted, and all this money tied up in bad inventory. So if now I kind of look at it like, okay, if whatever I'm getting, like I try to at least have like 1 item that's going to pay for the, like 1 or 2 items that will pay for the lot.
Yeah, and there's a learning curve too. Like, the longer you do this, you're going to learn, what sells, what doesn't sell. If you put time into doing the research, you're going to be able to make better decisions. Like when I go sourcing now, I'm a lot better than I was just a year ago, except maybe with jersey selection. I picked up some jerseys that look like they're fake, but in general, like you get better, and that's gonna help. Vanessa.
I was just thinking of like what Carlin said, getting to profit basically, or at least to, balance where you were originally at. That's kind of like what Jack was talking about on either, I don't remember if it was a media call or his Amazon call, but he'll do that. He'll kind of like prioritize those like best-selling items where he can get to profit really quickly, and kind of prioritizing his time too, like thinking about his hourly wage as well, like I don't know, just connecting that there.
And I like currently for me, like I'm doing less thrift stores. Like I've been focusing on lower cost of goods, and that's through the bins, or like I've been doing really well with garage sales. Like I'm in Texas, and pretty much year round we have garage sales, and most of the people are just getting rid of stuff, and for like $1, you could get really good items. So like my cost of goods have been coming down, and I do have one person that sources for me part-time also. but just being conscious. I think that for me, like that's a big thing, is being conscious of the expenses, and trying to lower them where possible. And if you think about the expenses of reselling, like obviously your inventory, besides like all the eBay fees and shipping fees, which you only have so much control of that over that, other than maybe promoted listings. It's the inventory that's going to be your big one. So if you can, I think that's what can make or break your business. Colin says, for me, it was difficult to grow because I was sourcing from week to week profit. Oh, it moved on me. Week to week profit, but I found it tricky because I really only had till Wednesday or Thursday to get my sales in because of the transfer times. And now that it's catching up, it is a better feeling and I can put more back in. Or Colin, are you saying that like you needed those sales to come in quickly, like you were listing and needing those sales to come in to generate revenue to get more inventory? And Carlin, yeah, you're talking about like Poshmark. I guess that that delay between the sell and they have to receive it, and where they get like 3 days before you actually, and then you can do the deposit, but that may take a day or two also. So there is a bit of a drag there on that platform and others.
So how would you go about like helping new resell, like people that are going to watch this video, right? How would you go about helping them kind of manage this hurdle of over investing or having enough money in order to be able to both, it's really, really hard to do this, by the way, to both survive and, grow the business at the same time. It's super difficult to do. And if my wife didn't have like income coming in when I started around October, November, December, January, February, like there's no way that I would have been able, well, it's possible, but it's much, much more unlikely for me to have been able to, survive, support myself and the wife, and also grow the business at the same time. Like there's no way I'd be in the same position right now if that was my circumstance. So how do you go about dealing with that?
Well, I think when you first start, like you want to have, you don't want this to be your income. Like for me, this was a side gig for several years. I did it part-time for, I don't know, I guess about 2 or 3 years. And I wasn't niched down, but I was an everything seller and a treasure hunter. But after doing that for a few years, I had generated enough sales where my sales were equal to, or the revenue was equal to or greater than what I was making teaching. So that made it easier. Now, so I wouldn't recommend going straight into it. Like, have another job, do this on the side, try to grow it slow. And over time, the business will grow, even just doing it part-time. And then eventually you'll be in a situation where you develop the money and the cash flow where if you want to, you could then make that switch. And not only the cash part, I think it's also the knowledge. I know a lot of us are impatient and we want to go from like for me, I've been reselling part-time as an everything seller, but then I see and I hear text model, and I'm one that I like to find people that are successful and really look at what they're doing and try to take as much as I can and implement it. And I believe that I could do that. And so when I saw that, I bought in, but I went too fast. I didn't have the expertise in close. Just because you can resell doesn't mean I knew that niche. So I think you've got to take the time to become an expert, and rushing it can cause a lot of problems because you can make a lot of mistakes that could cripple you. And if reselling is your full-time income and you make those mistakes, then you could be in a world of trouble, I think.
I've heard the response to because I think one of the most common things that Chris says, and like a common philosophy in the group, is like you should probably have a full-time job when you're starting and use that money to survive and then roll the reselling money. Like That's most common. But then you hear the counter of like, I feel that if I had more hours and if I could focus more time on reselling, then I can make it much, much bigger than otherwise. Like, how do you deal with those two things? Because I've heard that many times people go like, I could just do this full time rather than doing it part time. I'd make way more money. And a lot of the times it doesn't work out that way. It ends up backfiring hardcore because there's a lot that goes into it. But that's how do you deal with that, you know?
Well, let's hear from Vanessa, because I know she has a corporate job and she does this on the side.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Isaiah, when you're saying that, a big thing that came up recently was daily capacity, right? Chris started talking about daily capacity, and I don't think people like really consider that. Like I recently did my kind of like a time audit and did sort of like a multiplication of like, okay, I like for myself, yeah, I work a corporate job, so I like to limit it ideally to like 15 hours a week, up to no more than 20 hours a week. So I can look at my time audit and say, okay, in a 20-hour block of time per week, how many units, like, okay, shoes in this case is, but how many units can I get through? Okay, like if I know that, I can multiply that. So if I say I went full time, that's not really my goal, but if I went full time and I said I wanted to do 40 hours a week, like what would that look like? And if you do that time audit and that multiplication, it is an eye opener. I was like, wow, I would not be at the place like where I would want to do this full time. Like it wouldn't be worth it to me to make that switch. So that's a big, that was like a biggie for me. And then, yeah, I think it's a totally different game. I think to start when you have like the support of a full-time job, like, and just being able to create a nest egg. Because, now I have like a nest egg of capital where, we talk about if a really good deal comes up, like, okay, I'm ready, or something I'm starting to do now, like next year, I want to set a goal to establish a business relationship. So I can decrease some of the other areas of time where I'm spending, but I'm not going to be able to, I wouldn't be able to make those, good, solid business relationships without reliable capital behind me as well.
Yeah, I love that. Because you brought up something that's super, super interesting. Like when you do that, when you expand out that time audit and see like how much time would it actually take for you to make your money, like the money that you're making currently, or enough to survive. And it's like, it's not you're going to start this and now you get to work 40 hours a week and treat it like a normal job and, make normal job money and stuff like it doesn't work that way. Like I haven't seen anyone where it's happened like, or at least it didn't happen like that for me. It's like, oh, can you work 60 hours a week? Are you capable of doing that? Do you have the time to do that? Do you have the desire to do that? Like, and it might not be necessary for everyone because some people might have excellent processes, but when I started, I did not have excellent processes and I still don't. Like, so it's not, I feel like you start off by working way more than, you should. But the reason why you do that is so that you can kind of weed out all the things that you shouldn't be doing. And then you get to kind of focus in. And once you get super efficient, you can go to a normal 40-hour work week. But for me, it didn't manifest that way. Like, I think some of the questions you should ask yourself is like, would your family be okay with you not being able to take vacations? Because eBay wants you to list every single day. And I know we have the draft bank and things like that, but that's something that's kind of a new development in this group. But for a lot of people, they might not know about the draft bank if they're just listening to this video right now from Brian's YouTube channel. So, like, do you have the capacity to actually be able to do this full time or more than full time? Because unfortunately, eBay doesn't seem to be a opportunity where you can just be super flexible, do it whenever you want to, and then make enough money to pay whatever you have to pay. Like it doesn't it doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, it's a hard process of working and working and working and sacrificing so that you can get to what you want to get to, and then eventually it starts to pay off, and you get all those freedoms that people talk about from being your own boss, but it isn't like that in the beginning at all. Not even close. It's a lot of hard hours.
Okay. Ken?
Yeah, I was gonna say because I still work my corporate job too, and it's pretty demanding time wise. And the reason I haven't quit is because A, it pays all of our bills. So, Eric can just focus on building the business, which is the most important. But what happens is every time we're like, oh, okay, you could probably quit now, like we go, oh, why don't we just get an employee? Or why don't we do this? Or why don't we do that? Like it's always something the business uh always kind of has priority over me leaving the job. And for now, that's fine. Like I can handle the job for now, but eventually I'll get out. So it's really just your pain tolerance, I guess, for having a 9 to 5.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think it gives you options. And I know while I was teaching and doing this on the side, like that was my goal. Like I was working towards wanting to do this full time because I really enjoyed it, and the independence and be able to make decisions. Not to mention teachers are just more and more micromanaged. So, but if you have that full time job and it takes that pressure off where you can like Vanessa was talking about, you can build up that capital, and depending on what your goals are and what your lifestyle is and what you want to do, you could, I mean, you could keep this just as a part-time side and make lots of money doing it part-time, and you could fund vacations and retirement and do all sorts of things, or or you can transition to full-time and trying to see how far you could take it. But I think that's the beautiful thing about reselling is, there's no one way you have to do it. It's totally up to you and what you want to try to achieve.
I have a question. Do you think it's better to reinvest if you aren't relying on reselling money to pay your bills, do you think it's better to like keep reinvesting, or do you think it's better to just start off like with the profit first numbers and keep your expenses in that 30%?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know the podcast where Tech and Chris were talking about, and they referenced it on, like I was listening to the last week's Tuesday video today while I was working. The episode where they were talking about growth versus plateau. Like to me, that was like an epiphany kind of episode. Like for some reason in my mind, the only option I imagined was grow mode, foot to pedal to the metal. I guess maybe looking back, because that's what I was doing when I was doing it part-time. I was just purely growing. And once I niched down and, through the spring without stimulus, um, and everything, but realizing that there's the idea of reseller nirvana and plateauing and building some capital for a period of time, however long that is, before you go to the next level. I really like that. But even with that, for me, like I'm doing the real slow grow of just I add one a week. Like this week it's 28 listings a day, and next week it'll be 29. I just want to see like what what my capacity is, and by doing that slow growth model, what will be the number where I get to where I'm kind of maxed out, and hopefully at that point I'll be making enough money where I can handle, and I'll have the knowledge to be able to handle the next scaling, whatever that may be, whatever help I may need at that point. But definitely the model of bunch of VAs or Cellhound or Hammock and just going crazy, I don't think was working for me. But I don't know. But your question is like, is it better to do this model with the percentages or to reinvest everything? Right? Is that basically what your question was, Carlin? I don't know. What do y'all think?
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to add, like, for me, I've been kind of, for the last 3 years, I've been doing the reinvest everything model. And then when I got on Profit First, like I said, I kind of stopped the whole, like, playing catch up. So I'm in a good spot now, although I do have to pay back a wholesale lot that I bought last month. But when I was doing the budget, I was looking at my 30% and I was like, okay, I can allocate this much to inventory. And then as my sales, like as my inventory grows and as my sales grow, I just add a little bit more to the pot each time. And like, I don't know, I guess obviously I have to know myself and my situation, because storage here is so expensive that I feel like when I'm just using that 30%, like if I, or say 10% for my inventory, I'm so much more careful about what I buy. And yeah, exactly, like the percentage equals more money, so then naturally I'll just have more money to spend on inventory. But I don't know, I just kind of feel like it
I
might be a
think
disservice, because then like I can't grow as fast.
well, I think you when you said it makes you be more selective, and that's a good thing, right? So if you're being more selective, I only have X amount of money to spend on inventory, you're probably going to buy better inventory that hopefully will sell faster and for more money. And then as the percentage stays the same, even though he does talk about adjusting different percentages, like 1%, every quarter, and to try to get to those ideal numbers. But so I guess theoretically you would have more, if as you have more sales, your inventory budget would increase. But I guess it could also kind of be limiting, because you're still working within that framework. So I don't know. It seems like there could be pros and cons. But
What does everyone else think?
The way how, well, I was gonna what I was about to say was like the way how I do it is like it's because my listing goal is set. Like it doesn't increase or something. Like some people, like, how Brian's increases every week or something like that. Mine's set for an extended period of time. So as my income increases, I start to like build up a extra little fund inside of my checking account, where it's like maybe I go positive 300 this week, because like the amount that I need to spend is going to be the same every week. It shouldn't be, because I know what I'm buying now. I know where I'm going to buy it, so I have a really great idea of how much I need to spend to get the amount of inventory I need. So like I'm able to, like, each week maybe I go plus 300, plus 600, whatever, and then by doing that over time, I can dedicate money towards bills. And then now I'm building up this bit of that fund that Tech was talking about, where you can't reinvest all of it. Now, technically, I could take that money and go throw it into more inventory, but then that's how you get into situations where you have like 3-4 months of inventory and you can't really list all of it. So I like to try to keep it I like to try to keep the amount of unlisted inventory that I have very, very low, so that whatever money that I'm putting out there, it's always super active. And I'm not running into situations where money's sitting over there in the corner, which used to be my reality for like 4 months, where I had money sitting in the corner, I wasn't doing anything with it. So that's what I try to do. I try to have that plus 300, plus 500, plus 600 or whatever, going into my checkings account every week from my eBay payouts, and spend the same amount of money each week from inventory.
I wouldn't reinvest it unless it's like helping you do more per week. I would just hold on to it until something good comes along. That's usually, there's nothing wrong with having a cash, waiting for a good buy.
Yeah, I know
Yeah,
for me. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
You go.
I was just gonna say, I try to limit, kind of like what Isaiah was saying, like how far out I'm buying. And it's helpful to know either, I guess if you have an inventory budget, you can't, and like a you know, how many items you want to get out of that. You kind of have a built-in average cost of goods, or it's just separately, like if you kind of know what your average cost of goods are, you know, you kind of have an idea of, okay, if I buy 2 weeks out, this is how much is just going to be sitting until I get it listed, or 4 weeks out, this is how much is just going to be sitting here until you have it listed. So I kind of try to keep an eye on that, and I'll basically, like, for myself, I think I limit about 3 weeks out, because I just don't like it if it's just sitting there, you know, it's not making me money. So
And shoes are huge. I'm in the shoe category, but you know, shoes are massive. You don't want like
expensive.
a massive stack of shoes inside your house. Like it's not pleasant.
Yeah, I don't think he would be in favor of death piles either. I said that last week, that the best thing I ever did for my business was get rid of my death pile. I know it's controversial. No, I know not in this group, but on Instagram, if you say that, you're in trouble. But that, I mean, I can understand, like, with tech and he has multiple employees he has to take care of. But like, if it's just you, you know, there's all, like, I don't know. I'm 5 minutes from the bins. I have tons of thrift stores in my city. Like, there's actually one opening up in a couple weeks, like 2 minutes from my house. So we'll see how that goes. But like, I can get inventory off Facebook Marketplace if I want to. So I kind of had to reel myself in and go, okay, you know what? Like, I can get inventory constantly if I want to. I have a friend I could source from. So yeah, to have months and months of inventory sitting in your house, it's kind of just, it just ties up your cash. And then I was finding too that if I wasn't getting stuff listed on time, then the season would change, and it, or like the comps would tank, and it just wouldn't be like worth as much as I thought it was. And it was just a mess.
Yeah, the last time I went just on I spent a whole day just sourcing for shoes. I don't know, probably about 6 weeks ago. And as Isaiah knows, shoes tend to have a higher cost of goods than clothing. And I made a route through Dallas and hit I don't know, a whole bunch of Goodwills that day. And in Goodwill, like, shoes, adult shoes are $6.99. It's just, unless they mark them up, but like most of them were $6.99. And so I'm kind of thinking, like my mindset that day was I wanted anything that was going to make me at least $10 profit. So, you know, I picked up a pair of Fry boots for, I think they charge a little bit more for boots. Maybe it's $8.99. I picked up a pair of Fry boots, you know, that are going to sell for $150 or more. But that same $6.99 or maybe $8.99 in that case, I'm also picking up a pair of Sperry topsiders, which, you know, they may only sell for 20 or 25. Whereas if my budget was smaller or tighter, well, I'm not going to pick up the Sperry topsiders. I'm going to pick up the best items that are going to sell for the highest ROI, and hopefully also the quickest. So it's, I think there is value in being aware of, you know, of your expenses and how you're spending your money, which is what chapter 6 is titled Destroying Debt. And here, let me just kind of go over the main points, and then we can talk about it. And now, this, out of the 3 chapters, I enjoyed this one the most. And like I said, I've been through Financial Peace University, so I've kind of done this on the personal side, and a lot of those same ideas kind of transfer over. But he talks about a tipping point. And usually when you have a tipping point, like, I think he uses the analogy of, you know, you've gained some weight, maybe you see a picture, you're at the beach, you're like, oh my gosh, and you have that, like, for me, that's how I felt in January when I decided to try to lose some weight. So you get that pain point, the tipping point, like, you experience enough pain where you're willing to do pretty much whatever it takes to make that change. And in his case, that business, for his tipping point with his business, going back to the introduction, was when he was broke and he had to tell his family, and his little 8 or 9-year-old daughter slid her piggy bank across to him at the table while he was breaking down. And that was his tipping point. That pain was so much that he knew he had to make a change. Other kind of keeps in that chapter, it's like kind of the basics, right? And like, you should spend less than you make. And I think like in business and reselling also, it's easy. He talks about this throughout the book, right? It's easy to justify as a necessary expense, right? As part of growth. But are we always keeping this in mind, that we should be generating more income than what we're spending? And he talks about the power of emotion. He references, let's say, Tony Robbins, and he says you need both, right? You need that strong emotion to kind of get you started. But most people, when they have that tipping point, they'll get out of the immediate problem, and then they'll kind of revert back to their original behavior. And he says it's not enough just to have that emotion, but you also have to have a plan. And his system is basically a plan with the percentages and a way of doing it. So you need the emotion kind of to get started, but then you need to transition to a plan so that you can keep that momentum going. And he says that by doing this over time, and he talks about increasing the allocations, maybe each quarter that percentage goes up. But when you're paying yourself every quarter, and I do like this idea, like you pay yourself and then you're treating yourself, so you're looking forward to actually receiving that distribution each quarter, which kind of reinforces the power of the plan. What else? He also talks about celebrating victories, which Dave Ramsey talks a lot about that too. And this could be like when you're slashing expenses, like he talks about this mindset of with entrepreneurs and like even in our group, we're always talking about the top line number, right? The gross sales. We tend to focus on that. But going back to the very beginning, his question is, what's the health of your business? And part of that equation is to keep the expenses low so that your profit is higher. So that we need to celebrate those victories, not just the big sales, but those times that we're able to live leaner or cut those expenses. There's an example of I like this one, the just one more day guy, where he was talking about a friend of his who needed to pick up some electrical supplies or something, and they go by the airport. He's like, "Are you going to stop to get those?" And he goes, in just one more day. And then that kept happening for a while. He's like, "Why don't you ever go get this?" And his kind of like technique was, if I just put it off one more day, you kind of realize that a lot of things that you think are necessary, you realize are not necessary, or at least you're delaying that expense for as long as you can. And all that kind of helps to keep your expenses lower, and it becomes kind of a mindset. And I really like that, like just one more day, where honestly, I'm bad about that. Like when Chris, last year when he was talking about the photo box, I went and bought the photo box, and the best camera and all this and that, like that was my mindset too. And that's probably not the best mindset. And as Tex talked about in the group, that you don't need all the fancy equipment to be a good reseller. So having this lean mindset, I think, is really important. The other points, he talks about having a debt freeze where you're not adding any more debt, creating a lean team where, like for me, I did do this. I got rid of my VAs and I got rid of like List Perfectly. I quit cross-listing. Before we read this, I was like, all right, I need to trim some expenses. It's just going to be me, and I'm going to see what I can do before I try to scale. So what are some recurring fees? And then he kind of finishes this chapter talking about the concept of the debt snowball, which is from Dave Ramsey, where when you have expenses and you're trying to pay off debt, it's not a math problem, it's a behavior problem, right? And so a lot of people be like, well, I want to pay off the the debt with the smallest interest rate. Well, if you have a large balance, say on a credit card or a loan, and even if it's a low interest rate and you're not making a big dent into it, like psychologically, that kind of becomes discouraging. So what he recommends is you stack up all your debts from the smallest amount to the largest amount, and you don't worry about the interest rate. And on everything, you're going to pay the minimum payment, except for the item that has the smallest balance. And whatever extra you have that you're able to throw at that, you then make a big payment on that item with the smallest debt. And then over time, once that's paid off, you take all the money we're spending on that, and then you go to the next smallest debt, and you keep doing that. And this debt snowball over time builds up as you pay, one debt off and then another, and then it becomes really powerful. And psychologically, once you pay off that first one, and I know we did this when we went to Financial Peace University, you do get like this sense of victory. Even if it's a small debt, a small credit card, you pay it off, you're like, dang, that's paid off, I'm not using that anymore. And you feel good about that, and then that kind of reinforces the behavior. So I think that's really powerful. So those were kind of like the big key points from that chapter, and of course he got into a lot more details. Does anybody have any thoughts on the idea of debt or from that chapter? I see there's lots of, well, y'all think about that. Let me just kind of go over the chat. Valerie says, hi everyone, first time here. As for inventory, I get it when I can. I get my items for 15 to 25 cents a piece. Dang, I like that. This month, I got 400 items. Being in the Midwest, I have to prepare for the weather just in case. Well, yeah, well, at that cost of goods, you could definitely afford to stock up. That's great. Isaiah said, I wonder which model is better if cash flow is lower, not by our own desire, but because of your bills. Do you try to get as many items as possible for as little as possible, or do you spend more time and hunt down high profit items? And Isaiah just said, yeah, true. I think it's hard to figure out what in your area sells quickly. My entire focus now is high sell-through, but I didn't truly know how to. And I think that's kind of a key point, right? Like, you get better over time. Like, you have to put the time in to learn these things. And once you learn them, like your business is going to benefit. Yeah, that photo box, that is nice. All right, I've talked a lot. Anybody got any thoughts on debt? Or
I'm curious too, like what everyone thinks, because so I went quite a few months where I wasn't using a credit card. Like I said, I had cut it up, and then I decided to do a big wholesale order and went into some debt, which my husband, like, we discussed it and everything, and based on the numbers, like, I'm probably gonna at least double my money at least. But the thing is, it's not gonna, like, part of the order came a couple weeks ago and I've been listing it, and then part of it's coming tomorrow, and I still have 20 coats that are coming. So, but it was around, like, it's gonna be around 450 items, and so it's gonna take me a little while to get it up. But I am obviously gonna pay that back and then profit. But it's interesting because I just feel it felt icky. Like, that's the best way that I can describe it. Even though logically in my mind, I'm like, I know I'm gonna make my money back. It's not gonna be an issue. There's good stuff in here. Like, but I guess it's just, you're still going out of your budget. So it just feels like really stressful.
I think that when it comes to debt, or like getting someone to give you a loan or anything of that nature, I think if it's above like what you can normally spend, like let's say in cash flow per week you get $500, right? I don't think that you should take out a loan for $2,000 to buy a certain thing. The reason why is because you aren't experienced enough at spending $2,000 on inventory. So you might not know if you're able to photograph all of it. You might not be able to list all of it. It might not be as good as you thought it was. So you might feel that you're going to make this profit margin, but you end up making significantly less. The reason why I say this is because back in October, like early October, I wanted to spend like $9,000 of someone else's money. And in cash flow per month, I get like, at this point, I'm at like 1,500, not per month, per week, like 1,500 per week. But I wanted to spend $9,000 of someone else's money. And I was like, okay, I know a little bit about shoes. Now, these shoes were not in my category. They were in new shoes. They were new shoes that I never buy. And I was like, okay, I could take their money. I could buy these shoes. We get a 15, 20% profit margin, and everything's going to be okay. It's going to work out in the end. Q4 is coming up. So this is a perfect time to do this. Now, I tell you at this point, I didn't do it, by the way. I didn't take this deal. But I tell you at this point that I have a lot of those new shoes sitting over there in the box, right? They're all listed, and I've sold one of them. One of them in the span of over a month. And I don't have all 9,000 shoes. I have like 10. I bought like 10 pairs of shoes. And I've sold one out of that 10 in the span of a month. So imagine how much more stressed I would be if I needed to figure out how I'm going to pay back this person's $9,000 with shoes that I don't normally sell, shoes that I can't discount properly because it's not my money that I use to do this, right? So I think if it's outside of your regular realm of, like, let's say if you're used to spending $700 a week and you get $700 to spend on inventory, that's a different story. But if you spend, if you get way more than what you're used to and you try to deploy that capital, it's gonna fail. It's not gonna fail necessarily. It might not work out, and you're gonna be a very, very stressed person. And I don't think it's worth it for you. I think it's better to bootstrap it than it would be to get debt in order to get inventory if it's outside your range. Unless you're a super expert, like a super expert. Like Tech could probably get $1 million and buy a bunch of inventory and be okay. But at the same time, he might be able to do that naturally with his current cash flow. So definitely wouldn't advise it if it's above your cash flow like level.
And I think that's the thing. Like, as you get better, your cash flow will naturally improve. And if you're sticking with the percentages, or even if you're growing faster, like over time, it'll naturally increase where you can kind of gradually step into those markets. But like new shoes versus pre-owned is, as you know, it's two different games. The new shoes, you're competing against a lot of people that have access to that same SKU. Because I used to do new shoes. We had a Nike outlet that sadly is closed down now, and you could get brand new Nikes at a really discounted price. As a matter of fact, I found one left over in my inventory from when I did that like a year and a half ago. And like when I got that SKU, like it was a women's running shoe, like I don't know, a Flyknit or something. And I probably got like 15 in that one shoe in different sizes. And at the time when I was selling those, they were probably selling for $40 to $50. And I found one that was left over that wasn't listed. So I checked comps, and it blew my mind. Like now that those new shoes are sold out, it was like selling for 80 to 100 because there was less competition. So when you're looking at a used shoe, there's just a lot fewer of those, especially when you're looking at different sizes versus playing the new game.
That's what's so interesting, Brian. You just brought up something that's what I'm talking about. Like the numbers look so good when you're like in front of your spreadsheet looking at sold comps, and you're like, yeah, man, like these normally sell for $60, and I'm getting them for $35. Okay, this totally works. Like all of these are gonna sell. I'm gonna buy all of them. And
yeah, but you don't realize that they're putting them in every outlet across the country, right? That's what's happening.
That's where I was about to go. That's exactly what I was about to say. You don't realize that Adidas is doing a 50% off sale across the country. It's not just you, they're doing it everywhere. So you buy all of those shoes, and then you and all of your competition gets all of those shoes too. And now, the price just dropped down 30% for those shoes. And you said you'd have the money back by the end of December. and you're not hitting your projections at all. And since it's $9,000, you can't even pay it back with your normal cash flow because it's way more than what you normally make. So not only are you going to be pulling your hair out because you don't know how you're going to pull this off, but man, I think that when you try to pencil it in and be optimistic with the numbers, it ends up backfiring hardcore. And that deal would have went really badly for me. Like it would have been awful. It's because I would have lost all of that money.
And if you think about it, like going back to your earlier question or Carlin's or combination, like he would say you would only spend it if you have it in that account. And obviously you wouldn't have that in an account, so you wouldn't be tempted to spend it because you couldn't. But if you do take a big risk like that and you don't have the money in the account, and then if it feels like what you're projecting, then you're in a hot mess because, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to slash it when you don't have the money come in, then you're going to take the loss. And it's just horrible. So
you gonna go borrow another $9,000 to pay that person back, and just, like you're in so much trouble, you know. I think
that's why I'm not thrifting much at all, because I got all this stuff to list.
Yeah, you know, like and listing a ton of items is really, really hard. You know, like, and you're forced to do it now because like there is no more resting for you. You know, you might be tired and you're like, oh man, but I gotta get this stuff listed so I can hit my minimum payments. And that's just it's a lot when you're above your normal cash flow amounts. Like being like, let's say if you normally make 700 and you get $1,000, it's a lot different than normally making 700 and getting 2,000 in debt.
I really appreciate you saying that, Isaiah, because you put into words what I was feeling.
Hey, Tech, I have a question. I don't know if you're free to speak because like
I'm free to speak. Before we get started, I'm just absolutely mind blown at what Isaiah is saying, because this past 45-minute conversation was a 45-second conversation I had with Isaiah. And not to mention, he lost 3 days of not listing, pondering this after that conversation. But happy to answer the question, Brian.
So kind of like what Isaiah was saying, and then going back to like you always said, like whatever you sourced, you would stay up however long it took to get it listed. So I guess my question is, and maybe I have an idea, is like, obviously there's a big sense of urgency by doing that. Were you trying to shorten the cycle? Like what was your purpose of or mindset of you had to get it listed ASAP?
Because I didn't have any money. I had a 6-year-old. I was a single dad, and I can't afford to have items sitting in the corner. They need to go on eBay and they need to sell immediately.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. So that's kind of like the opposite of when we're talking about death piles and spending money when you don't have it. That's the opposite of what you have done of creating that sense of urgency, and you've got to get it listed so you can sell it to get that cash flow. Okay. That makes sense. And I guess a follow-up question, like, and I know you may not have read the book, but I guess hearing us talk about it and picking up on the key points, like, what do you think, going back to Carlin's first question of growth, like, do you think it's better to follow an approach like this where it's more structured and you have different accounts and you're more disciplined? Or is it, do you think it's better to go with the growth method? Where earlier we were talking about plateau versus growth. And then also, I don't know, I don't know, my thought's not really clear here, but also, I mean, you just said that you wanted to get it listed so you could sell it because you need that money. So I don't know. I guess how long, like how long, like working at that pace where you had that extreme sense of urgency, and I know you probably still do, like how long working at that pace did it take to put yourself in a position where the capital was building up quickly and allowing you to grow, if you can remember?
I think that when I was first starting, there wasn't a daily listing goal per se. You're new at the thrift, you're new at the flea market, you're new at sourcing. So maybe one day you find 15, maybe one day you find 22. There's no real, you're trying to figure it out as you go. So you buy items to figure it out. It wasn't until I made a plan that I'm going to list X amount per day. And I think that my first commitment to a daily listing goal was at 40 per day. And I think when I listed 40 per day, again, I was still kind of new, maybe a year or so into it. So I didn't know all the brands. I wasn't super knowledgeable, but 40 per day was a good goal to kind of go crazy and run around to a bunch of thrifts. And if I found 47, I would carry over those 7 for the next day or whatever day I came up short on the route. But at 40 per day with an average sale price of $30 and average cost of goods of $7 was making a tremendous amount of money because I was doing it from home, no overhead, no warehouse, no workers, nothing, just a computer. And I was still taping and maybe even handwriting labels at that point. So my only overhead was inventory. Now, when you talk about how do I feel about setting up all of these different bank accounts and whatnot, I think that when you're starting, try to have an average sale price between 25 and 30, average buy cost between 5 and 7, because with those margins, you can accumulate a lot of money real quick. And I would take out what you need for the bills, live very lean personally, operate very lean as a business, and reinvest everything back into the business. Don't go for the steak dinner. Don't go for the Jordans. Operate lean in your personal life and your business life. Reinvest all the money outside of that. So for me, it would be 2 ways that the money goes. One way, account for all the dollars that you need to live, your bills, your rent, your mortgage, whatever it may be, the kids, and then everything else goes back into the business and reinvest.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So,
So Tech, I don't know if this makes sense to you, but the whole 30% expenses, like obviously with it being a percentage, as your sales grow and your cash grows, then you automatically have more money for expenses. But I don't know, for some reason I just have your voice in my head saying like that's the safe way to do it because you're not like overspending.
Right. But in the beginning, what if your personal expenses are 88% of what you sold? What if your personal expenses are 17% of what you sold? Are you over saving and not reinvesting? So to have like a concrete hard number of X percent you save, X percent you reinvest. So for me personally, I lived very frugally in the beginning, very lean. Once I started rolling at 40 per day, my personal bills were not 30% of the money that I was making at the time. They're not even still 30% of what I make today. That would be like such an outlandish lifestyle to have 30% of what I make account to keep me alive.
I think, yeah, it's 50% owner's pay, but the 30% would be for your business expenses. So it's not letting it balloon to the point where you don't have the money to pay yourself. And that just seems a bit safer, I guess, to me. I don't know. It's hard. I can't explain it.
I'm of like a little bit of the opposite thinking where like saving is kind of passive and defensive, where earning is more on the offense. And I know, like I was talking with Isaiah, he can save $12 per day, but he can earn $12 per day much easier. Earning $12 per day is listing one more pair of shoes. If you told me to save $100, I would struggle how to save $100. But if you told me to earn an extra $100 today, I just need to list 10 hats. I need to list 5 hats. I know how to do that. But I think the saving is a little bit, in my opinion, like a scared personality, a passive, a defensive personality, where we all have the tools to go on the offensive and, grow our business to the point where we can get the cash flow into it where living paycheck to paycheck or month to month or payout to payout, disbursement to disbursement is no longer an option or a necessity or a need. And when we can keep all the money into the business, that's when, you know, just like the Dave Ramsey snowball, we can have the eBay snowball where all that money keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. And eventually, I promise you, run into the point where it's very, very difficult to spend the money. So I have like not a strict weekly spending budget, but I know how many pieces I need per week. And let's say I need 2,000 or 2,500 pieces. If I buy 5,000 pieces this week, I'm a fool. I don't need it. If I buy 1,500 pieces, I didn't budget my money smart enough. So if I'm in between the 2,200, 2,500 pieces, I know I'm fine. I'm not overspending. And at that price point with the sales that I'm getting, it ends up being a boatload of money at the end of the week or the end of the month. And you don't have to worry about cash flow. You don't have to worry about making it to Friday because you stay in line with your budget. But if you're listing 100 items a week and you're out here buying 400 items a week, that's a problem. And that's why your cash flow is tight. And that's why maybe it's week to week, paycheck to paycheck, because you're locking up money inside of inventory that's just going to sit there, and you continuously go out and go shop, exceeding 100 listings per week. You're getting 500 pieces where like you don't need to get it. And there's been times where I've had to overspend, like when COVID hit, I was buying 10,000 pieces a week because I didn't know what was going to happen. And when I was out spending 10,000 pieces per week, those weeks were tight. But you can taper it off and kind of get that money back, and maybe you don't buy as much inventory for 2 or 3 weeks and everything evens out. But you know, you just have to be mindful of your spending, and cash flow is everything. If you have good cash flow in any kind of business, and like you can make any investment you want, but the best investment is a good business with good cash flow. Nothing else beats that. So you have to keep your cash flow in mind, and you have to make sure that you reinvest as much as possible.
Could I hop in for a second? I have a question for you, Tech. Would you also caution against the inverse of that, where you mentioned how like you list only 100 pieces a week, but you're buying 500 pieces a week? That's a huge L. So also, would you also caution against you buy 100 pieces a week, but you spent all your money on 30 pieces because you paid up too much, or you weren't in control of your cost of goods? Would you caution against that as well, or is that something that could be more permissible?
You would be foolish to blow 100-piece budget on 30 pieces, because you're not going to hit your listing goal, and then you're going to fall into the trap. It's the same thing of needing 100 pieces and spending the money of 500 pieces. It's the same thing. It's quantity and it's dollar amount. So for 2,500 pieces, $5 each, that's $12,500 a week. That's what I need to spend per week. I don't need to buy someone's personal collection just because it's cooler and be out here spending $18,000 a week. I don't need to do that because I can get the pieces that I need to make sure the business stays afloat. And anything above that is cutting into the bottom line and cutting into my pocket at the end of the day, because I already have the business model. My business model is not having Isaiah come over and pay up for his stuff that might be a little bit cooler. That's not my business model. My business model is buying stuff for $4 or $5 and selling it for $25. And at this scale, with this warehouse setup, with this employee setup, with my schedule, it works as good as I need it to work. So if your schedule is 8 to 4, list 40 items with an average buy cost of $7, don't be out there spending $30 and $40 on items. If it's a one-time thing and it's going to net you a good profit, no problem. But you can't be out here spending $40 on 40 pieces and drop $1,600 because you blew your whole load for the week and maybe for the whole month, and that makes that week not profitable. It can even make the whole month not profitable. And how long can you sit around and bust your butt and work for free?
Yeah, I got kind of stuck in that whole thing because, like I said, here, like at the regular stores, well, Goodwill's the cheapest, which is like $9 for dresses, $9 for jeans, $8 for tops. Coats are like $17. And then Value Village is even more expensive than that. So I was finding better stuff that was flipping faster and for a lot more money, but then like I would run out of cash because obviously if I go to the bins and I spend $10, I can get maybe like 5 to 6 pieces versus like if I spend $10 on one item, like it's got to be a really good return. Otherwise, I just ended up with like no cash. So I was going to doing half bins and half regular stores, which brought my cost of goods to about $4, and then that was like good.
I think one of my favorite things that I learned from tech, even though there was a period of time in October in which I didn't apply this, but like he said that you don't always have to take every deal that comes we don't always have to take every deal that comes our way. You know, like there's always going to be another deal. Any deal that we find right now isn't special in the long scale of our business. Like when you look at your business as if it's going to last for 10 years, 12 years, any deal that you find right now isn't so special that you have to get it right now. And you don't have to like go get $9,000 of someone else's money in order to do the deal. There's always going to be other deals, and like I think that's super, super valuable. And I'm glad I didn't make that decision because I would be a real stressed human being right now, guys. It would not be good.
And I think, like going back to what Tech said about, and he mentioned this on the Tuesday call, you know, comparing an eBay business to the stock market or different investments, like how many times you can turn your money over in eBay kind of is like a kink in the matrix. And how he was just talking about cash flow. And on the Tuesday call, Tech, you mentioned something that it's not just a daily listing goal, you also have a daily sales goal. And we have a lot of tools at our disposal. And you mentioned that how you know at certain times of the day roughly where you should be with sales, and you actually, you know, employ those levers, you know, whether it's to send out bigger coupons or, you know, to drop 5% price drop on X amount of inventory. I think that's the beauty of eBay, is that we do have, to a degree, control of our cash flow. And if we're having a bad day or a bad week, you know, we could run a markdown sale at 30-40%, whatever we need to, and we may not get the ROI that we were wanting, or you know, that high comp, but we can still make profit. And by doing it in the volume approach, it creates a lot of money. And that's something, like for me, I used to have this idea I wanted to wait for all the money, and I would always look at the high comp, and my thought was, well, if they could get it, I can get it. But you know, listen to you over the past several months, and like I'm slowly beginning to take a lot more offers and trying to go with that fast nickel approach. And I don't know, just realizing that this is such a good opportunity, and it's not passive, and that we can control a lot of our cash flow. Let's see, Carlin said there's always more stuff. Cindy Thomason does discuss in Profit First for e-commerce sellers to focus on the sales you need and not your expenses, because what you focus on expands. Yeah, like where your mind is, it will go to. And I like, that's kind of like where my mind is personally as I'm reading this. Like I'm kind of taking the big ideas, like what Tech was talking about, a lean mindset. And once again, it's another book where what the author is pretty much preaching, even though Tech, he just explained it, he's not divvying it up, and he explained why. but he has and still does use that lean philosophy, and that's kind of the takeaway that I'm getting from this book is, if nothing else, to be aware of these expenses and be aware of profit and all these concepts that we're talking about. And even if you don't follow it to the T, to incorporate some of these big philosophies in your business. All right, does anybody have anything else on debt or anything else we've read tonight?
I just want to say one more thing. Like, you just gotta know yourself, and if you have a tendency to overspend, then it's just better to have everything separate. If you know what your bills are and you know what's coming in and what's coming out, and you want to keep it simple, then then like you gotta just have your system. I think it was someone had commented, where's the
Talking about
like
Ed, where you need
yeah,
structure.
the author and tech are saying the same thing. You need structure. So if you need that structure, then it's a good system. But it's good to have a separate bank account that's hard to access for your tax money, so that when you need to pay your tax bill, the money's there and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, to know yourself, and everybody's business is a little different, and knowing yourself. And if you need that extra structure, then by all means incorporate it and use it. And like we did when we went through Ramsey's Financial Peace University, we did put that structure into place because we needed it. So I mean, it definitely can work for you. I guess just kind of see where you're at and take, I think at a minimum, everybody can pull something from this. And if you need the more structure you need, probably the more closely you need to follow it, and you're not going to go wrong. All right. So I guess next week we'll do chapters 7, 8, and 9. And thanks to everyone that came out tonight. Thanks for your questions and participation. And it was a good discussion. I gained some value tonight. I hope everybody got something. And y'all have a good night, and we'll see you on the next call.